Dzień dobry, witam w kanale Sobieski, który jest podcastem Instytutu Sobieskiego, polskiego, prywatnego, niezależnego think tanku. Ja nazywam się B.Michałowski, jestem członkiem zarządu Instytutu, a zawodowo zajmuję się technologiami, innowacjami i technologiami krytycznymi. Oczywiście namawiam do subskrybowania naszego kanału, czytania komentarzy i raportów, które publikujemy na stronach www.sobieski.org.pl i oczywiście aktywności i dyskutowania na naszych kanałach społecznościowych. Dzisiaj tematem naszej rozmowy będzie przyszłość. Jak się jej nie bać i jakie kluczowe kompetencje jutra powinniśmy rozwijać już dziś. Moim gościem jest pan dr Frederik Pferd, długoletni Chief Innovation Evangelist w firmie Google, były wykładowca na Stanford University i osoba doradzająca firmom, jak budować kulturę innowacji. Dzisiaj też jest początek nowej przygody z nową książką, którą serdecznie wszystkim polecamy. Jak nie bać się przyszłości, kluczowe kompetencje jutra, które warto rozwijać już dziś. Ta książka też wchodzi na polski rynek, będzie można ją przeczytać po polsku. A teraz już przechodzę na język angielski. Cała nasza dzisiejsza rozmowa też będzie po angielsku. Frederik, welcome to Sobieski Institute. Welcome to Channel Sobieski. I'm very delighted that you are with us today. I am very delighted that we will have your thoughts in Polish published in Poland. So at the beginning, before we start talking about future, can you say a little bit about yourself?
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm tremendously honored to have a conversation about something that I think we both deeply care about, and that is the future. So I'm a German American, so I have both citizenships, and I really would consider myself as a global citizen, right? Traveling around the world and really interested in how do people perceive the future? How do people imagine the future? How do people create the future, right? And that brought me to many different people around the world. It brought me to organizations around the world, to startups, to governments, and so forth. And what I found is that most people look for predictions around the future. Everybody wants to know what the future looks like, right? In 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. But what I learned is that nobody can predict the future, right? But what we can do is we can create the future, we can shape the future, we can invent the future, right? And so I try to codify how we can actually do that. How can we create not just the future, but how can we create a better future for ourselves, for everyone that we care about. And that's what I'm tremendously excited to share today with you, what I've learned, and how can everybody basically create a better future for themselves.
So where do you live today? As a global citizen.
A global citizen, yes. I live in many different places, right? In the last 2 weeks, I lived at a friend in Berlin, where we spend some time with startups and other people. But I would consider home currently the Santa Cruz Mountains in California, where we live off the grid in a couple of geodesic domes. We grow our own food, and we're a family of 5. So with my wife and 3 kids, we live in a forest that gives us a lot of energy and a lot of, I think, probably energy for the work that I want to do.
Okay, so very interesting. So after being the Chief Innovation Evangelist in a global company, Google, now you are living in a forest.
Yes.
So before we jump into this topic, let me just ask you, what such a person like Chief Innovation Evangelist does?
Yes, so for about 12.5 years, I was responsible to really help grow a culture inside Google where every idea of the leaders, the employees, everybody in the organization was trying to fall on a ground that really helps that idea to grow, right? So I was basically preparing that ground so that all the ideas, the incredible ideas and how to make the world a better place and how to invent technologies, products and services can grow into something meaningful, into something purposeful, right? And so that was the work that I was doing for over a decade. And it's tremendous rewarding work that I feel I was able to do, because you work with thousands and thousands of people across the organization, right? From YouTube, from Chrome, from Android, from artificial intelligence, from cloud, all the products that basically now use billions of people. And you're trying to really identify what is it that helps those people to not just imagine a better future, but really create it, right? And that's what I decoded and trying to offer now everybody in the world, so that you and your colleagues and everybody basically can not just come up with better ideas, but really make those ideas a reality in the world.
So if you then share with us how a European, a German, educated in Constance, get a job like this one in an American company in California.
Yes, I would say that two things that really helped me, right? The first one is curiosity. Right? I'm a tremendously curious individual where I'm really wanted to live and work in as many places as possible when I was studying. So that brought me to South Africa, it brought me to Shanghai, it brought me to Buenos Aires, it brought me to many, many different places around the world. And that curiosity really helped me to learn, right? Learn from many people that I was able to meet and how they're creating a better life for themselves, right? And the second thing that really helped me, I think, was courage, right? Really like trying to step into the unknown, step into something where I didn't know how that will turn out, right? And using that courage to eventually creating my own role, right, in a large organization like Google. So there was not a job posting where I applied to, but I joined the company, and Larry Page was signing my contract when they were not really sure what to do with me, right? And I basically created my own little playground so that I can help as many people as possible in that organization to imagine a better future and then eventually create that future.
Okay, we have young listeners of our channel. Can you say a little bit about your background as well, education? So,
yes.
What should we finish to become an evangelist?
Yes, I don't think it actually matters, right?
Okay.
I think it doesn't matter what you're studying or what your what the path you're on is providing to you. I think it's more the inner attitude that's important, right? An attitude of openness, right? An attitude of, again, courage, an attitude of curiosity, I think is way more important than what you're actually studying, right? If it's physics or law or engineering, I don't think that's important. I think what you're going to do with that, right, with your curiosity, with your openness and your courage is way more important.
But very often when we are talking about innovation, we are thinking about technology. Maybe it's not right. We should look at it broader.
Yes, I think we confuse sometimes that innovation is only about technology, right? The next big product, whatever it is. I think there's many different things that are important when it comes to innovation. For example, what are the human skills and what I call mind states that we need to really create those innovations, right? What kind of inner attitude do we need as human beings to be able to imagine a future, right? Imagination is something that we can learn and get better at, actually. We can train ourselves in imagination. or asking better questions, which is related to curiosity, right, is something that we can learn no matter what we're studying in college or at school, right? And for me, I've always been interested in what makes an organization, for example, like Google, innovate, right? What is it? Is it that they have access to more resources? Is it that they invest more time in innovation? Is it that they breathe specific air, right? Is it that they have incredibly talented people in this organization and so forth? What I found after my first 18 weeks in this organization, visiting many offices and having a lot of conversations with people and observing them, is that none of that is true. It's not that if you have more money as an organization, right, you're more innovative. It's not that if you have a specific environment, an office environment, that makes you more innovative. It's not that the air that you're breathing is very different, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have to smell kind of like Silicon Valley air or California air to be more innovative. What I found is that there are, for me, 5 specific key ingredients that I observed in people, and that is optimism, openness, curiosity, experimentation, and empathy. Those for me are the 5 key ingredients that people were practicing and bringing to the work they were doing so that they really could build tremendously innovative products and services and business models. And so for me, that was what I would consider very surprising, because again, what we see in the world of innovation is that a lot of governments, a lot of startups, a lot of organizations are throwing more and more money, investments at their own teams or organizations or people, right? And then they stand back and wish or hope that an innovation will come out, right? But that's not what I found, because more money doesn't lead to more innovation, right?
So we should emphasize this. Can you repeat those 5 points?
Yes. So it's optimism.
Optimism, okay.
Which basically helps you to see the glass not just as half full, but you see the potential to fill the glass even further. And I think that's a big difference, right? Optimism is something that is a choice, right? It's an attitude that we can hold. Because if we are optimistic, and I argue for radical optimism, then we are actually trying to not just believe that the future can be a better one, but we are actively trying to shape that, right? So we're actively going towards the future and say, like, this could be a better world, this could be a better solution, there is a better idea, whatever it is, right? So optimism is very important. Openness basically allows you to make change your friend, right? Because if you're open to change, then you don't see change as something that you need to work against or avoid, because that's actually not possible, because change is something that happens naturally, right? It's the law of nature. Everything changes, right? Yeah. We have changed in the last 15 minutes. Everybody has changed in the last 15 minutes or in the last second even. So if you can make change your friend, I think you're an open individual, right? Where you embrace change, where you're trying to be open to different opinions, different ideas, and so forth. And curiosity as a third one, explores new ideas.
I'm taking notes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Curiosity is very important, as what I see, the most curious organizations are actually startups, right? Because startups, they don't have any, in the beginning, they don't have any money, they don't have any infrastructure, they don't have any legacy.
They have nothing.
They have nothing.
Often.
But what they have a lot of is curiosity, right? They're curious.
Very optimistic.
Absolutely.
Usually very optimistic people.
Absolutely, they're optimistic. They believe that there is a better solution, right? There is a better idea that they're working on. And so curiosity is something that really helps you to explore new ideas, right? That allows you to ask better questions. And then your fourth dimension, what I call, is experimentation, right? Which basically helps you to learn very quickly, right? You try things out. you experiment with very different approaches. And when it comes to the future, that is very important because most people think you need the best plan for the future, right? So we start planning and planning and planning until we think like we have a plan how the future should look like, right? And what mostly happens is that everything changes, right? So what I'm arguing for is instead of planning, do tiny experiments, right? Try things out. If you have a vision of the future, try to create an experiment that allows you to bring that vision to life right now, right? And experimentation is something that you also can practice and train yourself in. And then when I share kind of like these 4 dimensions, there's a 5th one, which I think is very important, and that is empathy, right? Empathy for me is one of those super skills of the future, because empathy helps us humans to connect deeply with each other, right? To really understand what is necessary in the world and what the different needs of people actually are. And empathy is not just understanding other people, but also understanding your future self, understanding what do you actually need in the future, right? And that is an empathy that really allows you to be a better leader, be a better human being, be a better parent, better father, a better mother, a better child, a better student, you name it, right? A better politician. So empathy is one of those super skills, I think, that is very necessary. So those 5 are what I discovered really making a difference, because they differentiate from an organization where it's not innovative, right? It's not creating a better future, from an organization who really is at the forefront of innovation, who creates better products, better solutions, better technologies, and so forth. And for me, that's fascinating because all of those dimensions, those 5 dimensions that I just shared, are already inside us, right? They're already somehow inherently inside us, and for us, it's very important to unleash them, right? To allow them to grow, right? You can be a more open person, a more curious person. I can show more empathy. I can be more optimistic, right? Those are things that we can grow and develop. And that would be, for me, the number 1 recommendation I give to leaders or organizations or other people when they think they want to create the best next, so the best future, is invest in those things, invest in optimism and train people to be more optimistic, invest in openness, curiosity, experimentation, empathy, because those are the key differentiator.
So let's say I fully agree with optimism, openness, curiosity, and empathy. That's inside us. But for experimentation, it's very often you need time, you need money. It's not only inside, you especially for this 4th dimension, as you said, money is needed as well. So it's not really inside, or maybe you are the definition of experimentation is more the courage of taking the risks.
Exactly. That's exactly what I would define it by. It's having the courage to take a risk, having the courage to try something new, right? Because experimentation doesn't lead to failure. Experimentation always leads to learning, right? And if you are the fastest one who learns what works and what doesn't work, right, you're actually saving money in the organization, right? You're saving money for the team. You're saving also time, because then you're not going down a path where you probably will see that it's going to not be successful, or there might be something that doesn't work out, right? Because you've learned that really, really quickly.
The title of your book in Polish is Jak nie bać się przyszłości. In English, it means how not to be afraid by the future.
Mm-hmm.
Your English title is What Next is Now. It's not slightly the same thing.
Absolutely.
Why we have 2 different titles?
So there's a couple of reasons, I think, right? What I want to do is I want to help people approach the future from different angles, have a different relationship with the future, right? And so What's Next is Now really is a title, I think, that gears towards to understand that the future is not far out on a horizon. It's not a far distant kind of like vision that you have. It's happening with every choice you make right now in this moment. Right? And if you make choices that are led by optimism and openness and curiosity and experimentation, empathy, the choices will be better ones, right? Which also leads to a better future, right? And so for me, that I think really resonates with a lot of people around the world. How not to be afraid of the future, I think, is also something that resonates with a lot of people, right? Because fearing the future is something that attracts a lot of attention of people, right? Mm-hmm. Because everybody at some stage feels that the future is out of their control, for example, right? We sometimes think that the future is just happening to us, right? When we think about big technology shifts in AI, for example, when we think about the climate, when we think about war, right? When we think about crises around the world, right? We think that we don't have really control about the future. But what I want to give people is that feeling that you actually have more control than you think about the future, right? Because you can control not other people's opinions, for example, but you can control your own response to an opinion of someone, right? You cannot control when the climate shifts, but you can control what you're contributing to that climate shift, right? You also probably not control like the latest developments in AI, right? But what you can control is how you experiment with those AIs, right? How you use them in your daily lives. Mm-hmm. So I think there's more control there's more control over your future than you actually think. And then for most people, they feel that the future feels uncertain, right? Which it actually is by definition, right? And when our brains are wired for survival, right? We want to survive, right? That's the mechanism that's built in our brains. We always come up with these worst case scenarios. We always come up with the worst things that can happen, right? And that really creates that fear inside us, right? But if you turn that around and don't just think about the worst case scenarios, but think about the best case scenarios. What's the best that can happen in our future, right? We move away from fearing the future to actually start creating it, to start embracing it, to start being excited about it. And the last thing I think, which is really represented in that title too, is that we sometimes feel that we are not enough for the future, that we don't have the skill set, right, that we need in the future. We don't have the experience and so forth. But I think we are enough, right? We already have everything that we need. We just need to bring it out. And the one thing that I hope people take away from my work and what I want to give people is that they move away from that question, what will the future bring? And move towards that question, what future do I want to create? Right? I think that's a better question to ask, because the first question, what will the future bring? Nobody can answer. But the second question, everybody has control over and everybody can actually answer.
Okay. You are in a think tank, so we are trying to create ideas for Poland. What would you advise to the government, or what would you say to the Polish government? What kind of competences of the future, as is written in your subtitle of the book, should the government and we all invest it now? Mm-hmm. What are those key factors which will prepare us, or maybe allowed us, Poles in this case, to create a future we want?
Mm-hmm. It all starts with imagination, right? I think that is something that we all can get better at, right? If I would ask you, like, can you imagine the future, how it would look like, how it would feel like in 10 years from today, right? And you give me a very detailed description of, like, how would a day in your life look like in 10 years from today? I think we would take some time to actually do that, right? But we could get better at it, because I've just been to the Museum of Technology here this morning.
In Palace of Culture?
And when you look around, right, you see kind of like these technologies, like the plane that is on the kind of like roof from the Wings Wright brothers, and you see different technologies like rockets. You see like phones or kind of like radios or TVs, whatever it's been. And one of the fascinating things was that they have these different living rooms or teenager rooms from the different years. So they have a teenager room which looks like, which used to look like in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and so forth. And you see, like, this is pretty much how the past looked like, right? But I haven't seen anything in that museum where I feel like this is a scenario that is desirable for the future, right? That really gives us an idea of how could the future look like, right? And that is something I think we can get better at, to help people to really start to imagine which future do we actually want to see happening. So if we just take AI, for example, right? If we would have set together probably like 15 or 20 years ago, right? Would you have imagined that we are now at a time where we have pretty much and intimate relationships with AI, right? Where we ask AI probably like hundreds and hundreds of questions, or give them tasks, or ask very intimate things that we probably never would have imagined 20 years from today, right? So if we imagine the next 20 years or the next 10 years, would you imagine that it's not just one Frederik that probably walks around the world, right? There's a couple of Frederiks, maybe cloned, right, that are pretty good, versions of mine, right, which we already are using today, because there is a version of mine with my AIs that replies to emails, basically, right? That maybe sometimes in the next year sits in meetings for me, right? If we have my virtual clone, my avatar basically joins a meeting, right? How would the next 10 years then look like, right? And I think that is something exciting to engage people in that imagination, and have a conversation about what are the implications of that future, right? It's the same with self-driving cars. I've been able to work intensely with those teams, right? And now you see that vision a reality. In the 50s and 60s, that was basically unthinkable, unimaginable, that there will be a time when cars drive themselves, right? But now you look in Austin, Texas, in San Francisco, and in many different places, that this has become a reality, right? And so those were two examples that are very tech related, but I think there's also a very human future that we can imagine, right? What's the relationship of people in the future? How do we communicate with each other, right? Will we actually just look at each other and we can transmit our thinking to each other, right? That has been in science fiction movies many, many times. Or will we have more intimate relationships with each other, where we can share emotions in a better way, right? Now you can just basically, based on facial expression, right, think about how are you feeling at the moment, right? But I think it needs to be better in the future to understand human beings and how they feel, so we can help them and help people that are suffering in that mental health crisis that we see around the world now. So imagination would be probably something that I want to help people to do better. But then the dimensions that I just mentioned, right? I think you pretty much can build a curriculum around that, which I've already done, to go into organizations, say like, hey, how can we help your people to be more courageous? How can we help them to experiment better? How can we help your people to experience a culture where optimism is the predominant way of looking at the future, right? Where people are open with each other, right? Responding to ideas with curiosity, asking better questions, where there's empathy, where they feel what are the basic needs of people that we can serve with our products and our inventions and technologies. And I think that for me would be the number one recommendation, is invest in those types of what I call inner attitudes or mind state that really helps you to build a future that is radically better.
Okay, I would say very clear guidelines. In terms of imagination, let's say, I think in Poland we are lucky to witness a lot of changes. Let's say 25 years ago, I couldn't imagine that in Poland we could have better highways than in Germany you had. Mm-hmm. But that happened. So of course, great things can change within even a short period of time. So I fully agree with you. So just to sum up what you said, we should invest in all activities, projects allowing the growth and the development of imagination of people, one thing, and another, work on solutions which are promoting openness and better basically interaction between people. So I fully agree with you. Thank you for the thought, for this idea. Regarding our European states, 20 years ago, among the largest technology companies, we had some European ones. 20 years later, in Poland we have better roads, that's true, but on the list of largest, biggest, more advanced, more innovative companies, we have just one European. We did something wrong in the area of imagination, I guess, in the area of creating those new things. What should we change to regain this spirit maybe of openness, optimism, curiosity, willing to take risk to make tasks and for empathy? Or maybe empathy is quite okay in Europe. Mm-hmm. If I compare Europe to US, I think we care more. Mm-hmm. But maybe I'm not just, but that's my opinion. But in general, coming back to my question, what should we do to be again to have companies among the most advanced, most innovative in Europe as well?
Yes. First, I want to ask you, why do you think that has changed? Why do you think there has been that shift where there's not the predominant, most innovative companies now that we see around here? Why do you think that is?
Look, I'm seeing the results. I'm seeing who is basically, maybe it's not the best measure, but I'm checking the turnover, the number of patents, the number of innovations, number of employees. And from this perspective, I used to work many years for American companies as well. So from this perspective, I think Europe lost something, lost this creativity of creating new things and creating companies. Despite that each year we have new strategies, new goals, very ambitious, we want to be knowledge society. Anyway, all politicians are discussing about this, but as a result, I take the list of the biggest companies, and there are many companies from US and China right now. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think it basically is that we probably should stop talking negatively about what we're doing, right? And that's true for Europe, that's true for the US and around the world, right? We sometimes just complain, right? Complain that it's not going fast enough, we're not doing the right things, or we complain that other people are more innovative, right? I think we should go back to really feel grateful for what we are actually doing, right? And I think there's many, many great things that are emerging, right? In Europe, in Germany, but also here in Poland or in the US. And I've been able to, in the past years, work with a lot of Polish startups and Polish organizations, right? We worked on a project called Designers for Innovation, right? Which was a huge project where we reached about 10,000 Polish people here across many cities like Krakow and so forth. And over 500 companies were emerging based on that program that we did. And what it told us is that it's not about the access to resources or money, right? It's not about complaining about everything, right? That others are better or others are more advanced and so forth. It's coming back to these basic principles around being optimistic about the future, believing that I can see the potential to fill the glass even further, to come back to that metaphor, to be open, right, about new ideas and so forth, to be curious, to experiment, and to show empathy, because that's what we trained those people in. So we had very intense trainings that really unleashed those capabilities in people and those competencies.
Is it still going on, this program?
It's partly still going on, yes.
Okay.
Some of these organizations have been quite successful, and what I'm more curious about is those individuals, right? How did they do that? And I think we should focus on learning from them, right? What was it that helped them to be optimistic? What was it that helped them to experiment, to have the courage to bring that word back again as well? And so this is something that I think we should invest more in, right? These training programs that are not training people to how to use AI, right? I think that's a waste of money, right? Because you don't have to train somebody to use a technology that is very intuitive, right? Because you can speak with your AI, right? So there's no training that you need, right? We should instead use these resources to train people in those very human competencies that are worth developing today so that you can create a better future. And I haven't seen a great curriculum around how do you train somebody to be more courageous, right? How do you train someone to think, not to fear the future, but to be more optimistic about the future? And that I think I want to offer to people, right? Because I think I've used those approaches and trained not just Google, but like organizations around the world, right? That really are at the forefront of what we now see in terms of innovation, in terms of seeing creativity that they're using to build a better solutions. And I want to offer that now to everyone. And I think that's something that we used to call soft skills, right? Which are very intangible. They're very what we think like even childlike, right? What we would probably teach to a kindergartner. I think those types of soft skills are now the hard skills, which we need to not to teach to kindergartners because they already have imagination, they have curiosity, they like to experiment because that's how they learn. We now need to teach that to CEOs, right? We now need to bring that back to every employee in an organization because I think that's where the magic is. And I've seen that and I've witnessed that in so many organizations that when they use those approaches, they're going to be more successful. They create an environment where employees find more meaning in their work. And eventually, they're going to build a better future.
So the answer is, not only for Europe, but for everybody, more optimism.
That's
to be
part
more
of the
optimistic.
That's part of the answer, yes.
So I would maybe an advice, if I can, to you as well, were to spread this optimism. 30 years ago, we had many very funny films, optimistic films on TV. Alf, I guess you remember, or Wonderful Years. All those films were great and very optimistic. What I'm missing,
the Jetsons.
Yeah, of course. So all very optimistic things. Today I have a feeling that we should especially target the screenwriters and the producers of movies to have more optimism in the art and in this sphere.
I like that, yes. I don't like the word target because why don't we create our own playbook for the future, our own science fiction vision and how we want to live in the future, right? And if everybody does that, I think the conversation starts to change around complaining about what we don't have or that the past might have been better, right? That's the conversation we mostly observe towards how can the future be a better one? And let's all write that book of the future that we desire, that we want to see happening.
Okay, I think it's a good end of our discussion. Let's write such a book of optimism for a better future. Frederik, thank you very much for your presence in Warsaw. I was really surprised that you visited the Museum of Technology in Warsaw as a Google Evangelist. It's inspired me. I will go there as well because I didn't visit the place for many years. So anyway, thank you very much. We will recommend your book. Wszystkich zachęcam do kupienia i przeczytania książki Jak nie bać się przyszłości. Bardzo dziękuję. Proszę nas subskrybować i zapraszam na kolejne nagrania kanału Sobieski. Dziękuję i do zobaczenia.